Hello Natroners and welcome back to another episode of VFX with Natron. So, today we're going to do part 2 of our particles, or exploration into particles, with the goal ultimately of mimicking what we're doing, or what Video Copilot did with their crossfire tutorial. That is the ultimate goal. If you haven't seen it, the link is in the description. Go watch it. You can see where we're ultimately going to go. But in order to pull off this effect, which has been requested multiple times, we need to have 3D particles. So that is the ultimate goal of this, is to get particles for this. We're not going to be actually creating all those other parts or the rest of the tutorial yet. We're first focusing on how do we make 3D particles. So with no further ado, let's get over into Natron. All right, so here we are looking at what we had last time, as we can see, and we have a few issues that we have to deal with. Let's first deal with the first major problem, which I figured out after we finished last time, which is an issue of things not repeating. This is our circular particle, quote unquote, that we made using a simple radial and the gimmick extrude, extrude 3D, or 3D extrusion. And the problem we have is that we made this a 48 frame. We made this 48 frames. Oops, that's not 48. I want this to be our skip frame to be 48. We're on frame run right now, and if we're on frame 1 and we hit the forward 48 frames and we look at it, we can see that it doesn't match up. And the question is why doesn't this and this match up? Well, the answer is actually a lot simpler than one might think. If we look at our expressions here, if we go in and we edit our expression, we'll notice that everything here is integers. And that was a mistake on my part. Our end result is going to be an integer, but we need to, because we're doing a modulo at the end, but we need our math for the division of the frame times whatever the number is to be a floating point variable, or otherwise things will get rounded in. It won't wind up exactly at 360 when the math is done. So we need to add somewhere in this first part of our expression, we need to add a 0. So what I think I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put after the 360 here, I'm going to just put a 0.0, and I'm going to just copy this, select that, copy it, okay, hit OK. And then we're going to go in. And as we watch this, as this continues, as we edit each one of these expressions, and change that 360, same 360, we'll see that the variables change, and we'll see that this is updating to match. And we'll see the result down here. This may or may not change in real time, but we'll see that it will ultimately reset. And so there we go. All right. So now, if we go back to the beginning, and when we hit the plus 48 frames, we can see that indeed now it is looping perfectly, or it will start looping perfectly if we use that. All right, so that covers our first object, which is our radial, or our radial version, which let's just look at what that is. Basically, we took this radial, we did a transform, shrunk it down, then we turned it into, or we put a solid behind it so that it took up the entire frame. We have it merged over it so that it crops, gets rid of the bounding box and makes it this size, and then we extrude it out and turn it into our actual object. But we've reduced the resolution of the object down to 3 polygons, or to a detail level of 3 for the polygon tessellation. And that results in this, which is just about as low as we can get it. And it makes a simple thing, which is all we need for something that looks like a 3D particle. Now that is that's one type of particle. We also did a slightly more complex particle, which is this particle over here, which we started off with basically a roto shape. We took no, we didn't start, excuse me. I was going to thinking of doing a rotor shape, but no, we used SE noise. We created an SE noise where we basically clamp it to the brightest point on the, let's look at that. We clamp it to the brightest point. We take a mimic of that. We basically take the exact same pattern, but we use a different type of pattern in it, or a different version of it. We use basically Voronoi, excuse me, type 3 as opposed to cell, and then we increase its contrast, or increase, actually we change the gamma value, and then we basically mask it using the original one, which we had clamped to that to create the mask, and then we get down to this point. So if we go forward to frame 48, we can see we suffer from the same problem, exact same problem here. So we'll go into this, we'll edit the first expression. Whoops, don't clear the expression, edit the expression. We'll select that 360, paste in our 360.0. Whoops, edit the second expression, double click, paste in that, and then we can see it's resetting. Edit this expression, paste this, and now if we go back to the beginning, we can see perfect match, 48 frames, we get a perfect loop, and so we know this is going to loop. Now that we've got that looped, what we need to do is speed things up. And the way we're going to go about speeding things up is using a couple things that we've used in the past. The first thing is we're going to use is a disk cache node. So we're going to type in disk, get a disk cache here, and we're going to change this. Now, in the past, what we've done is we've typically only cached a single frame to turn it into a still image. But in this case, we're going to be caching a specific frame range. So that we have a frame range. We're going to cache our entire loop. That way we only have to render this loop out one time. So the way we do that is, instead of doing our entire frame range, we're going to set it to manual, and we're going to tell it that we want it to be, because we're starting at frame 1, 48 frames after that is frame 49. So we type in 49 for our last frame here, which is where we are. We can see that in our timeline, frame 49. So that's where we're going to cache it to. The problem is, when we cache it to that point, at this point, if we hit play, it's going to go past that point, and it's not going to use the cache after that point, or it will have to cache out the rest of it. Well, why would we, when it's a loop, why would we have to recache or build that cache up past that point? Why not just reuse the cache? We know we can by using a frame loop or a time loop. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hit tab, we're going to hit time loop, we're going to click on time loop right here, and make sure that we connect it up. Make sure all these things are connected, by the way. If these are not connected, it probably means that your gimmick node, you need to make sure that your gimmick, when you over here, the reason that one of the things we need to make sure of is that the output is set to use the bounding box of something that is the output resolution, in case, like over here, gimmick nodes will not connect up to something that has an ROD that is different. The input ROD is different than the output ROD of a gimmick node. And the ROD is wrong. So that is the reason that we have this solid up here. And by the way, I also want to point out, big news, Natron has been updated. If you haven't, well, I should say there's a beta number 2 of Natron, and one of the big features, or the most important reason to me that this is an important feature, is that solids no longer default to having their alpha off. Oh, this is huge news, huge news. I highly recommend downloading it, because no longer do you have to worry about, when you're connecting up a solid in anything in the future, will you ever have to worry about turning on that alpha channel. It defaults to being on. Great news, great news. There's other improvements as well. The font, the text node now loads all system fonts based off of the new position on Windows. Windows had problems because it didn't recognize the new location that Windows had relocated fonts to. It now will find them and load them from there. So now system level fonts on Windows will also load in. Anyway, don't want to, that's sort of an off topic, but download it. I'm using it here, and you should know that. Anyway, but we want to, the goal behind this was that we want to crop so that our bounding box, which we can see here is using B, that fixes it so that the bounding box, which was smaller than a background, is now the size of a background, and that way the gimmick node is perfectly happy using it to make all 3D extrusion. So we're back over here. We look at our time loop here, And then our time loop, what we need to do here, for our time loop, we have to tell it our first frame of our time loop is going to be frame number 1, because that's the first frame of our animation. And the length of the animation is going to be 48 frames. All right. So when we do that, now watch what happens here. When we rewind this to the beginning and we hit play, we'll notice this takes a little while to cache. But once we pass frame 48, the magic is going to happen. This is suddenly going to speed up exponentially. Now, we're also going to do a couple more things in here in the near future, but I want this at a big size so that we can actually watch this as it's caching. Right now, it's caching this animation, and this will happen in your thing. And as soon as it hits frame 49, bam! Now, it's just playing it back in real time, because it doesn't have to redo that animation. It's just reusing that animation. So, this is going to be really, really useful when we use these disk cache nodes with the frame loop. Every time we want to reuse this, we basically, or do something after this point and reuse this animation, we just chuck in the same disk cache and and time loop. And we will, every time it will render out only the first, basically, however long our loop happens to be. In this case, it happens to be 48 frames, but it's 1 through 49. So as soon as it passes frame 49, we loop, and we'll get a loop. So we can speed up our particle system. No matter how many particles we put on the screen, we only have to worry, or Natron will only cache that first 49 frames, and then it will render very, very fast, and the rest of your animation will zip out very, very quickly. All right. So this brings us to the next issue. We want to put this into a tile node. Why do we want to put it into the tile node? Well, we want to make tiles of the tile node, as we discussed last time, has this really neat feature where we can do a time offset. Now, I made a boo-boo when I set it up last time, which is I set the time offset to 9. And it really shouldn't be. We don't want 4 rows by 4 rows and have it a time offset at 9, because we're going to be looping it. We really want to have it so that all of these are different variants of it. So what we need to do is figure out we have 48 frames and we're dividing it by 48, which means that we want to, if we have 48 frames and we divide it by 48, well, let's look. We take 48 divided by, I think that's 8, right? 4 by 4, right? No, 16 divided by 16 equals 3. So we want that time offset to be not 9, but 3. And that should mean that every one of these is a different variant of it at a different point in time. So that if we put something over it, we'll get some random combination of this grid of particles at different points in time. All right? And no two will be exactly the same. That is our goal here. Now, because we've done this, we faced the exact same problem. Now, even though we've cached it beforehand, we're still going to have to cache it afterwards. So what I recommend doing is just selecting these disk cache node and frame loop and just simply copying it. And we're going to put that in right here. And by doing that, now, if we select this new frame loop, when we back it up and hit play, watch what happens. Our first 48 frames you'll notice this is rendering very quick too, much faster than it did before, because the reference point that it's using to build this is already in cache. It's already been cached back here. Now I'll tell you this is imperfect. Sometimes some nodes just don't like it. Gimmick is going to, as soon as we get to a gimmick node, it's going to rebuild the cache for all of them. But it's not as bad as if you had done, it's actually much worse if you do the caching. If you try to leave things before the cache, non-cached, it actually takes even longer. So it's good to have these disk cache at every time you do something new after the disk cache. It will speed things up. So there we go, and we're zipping along. And so there we go. We have all our animation. These things are flying. All right, so we have 16 variants of our particle for our particle animations. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to be able to select these randomly and block them off in some way. Well, how are we doing that? This is, now we could in theory run this through the array modifier over here. Whoops. Now, all right, you don't know what's going on. We're bringing this up from the last time. This is actually wrong. I've got this set up wrong, but I was cheating a little bit. We have over here, we have this set up. This is not set up right. This is set to 4x4, which is not going to give us the proper result. We want to set this so that this is 8x8. So let's set this to 8x8, and then we're going to do an 8x8. And we could do it 4x4, but well, let's see something here. If we set this to 4x4, no, we want to keep it 8x8. We'll do 8x8. We're going to do that because what we want to do is we want to block out a random amount of these with every single loop. You know, I'm just debating. Do we really? Well, let me just think about this for a second. Yeah, we're going to just leave it like this. All right, so we have this, and we're gonna block this off. All right, we can see that basically what this is doing is we've created a situation here where we've taken a checkerboard. All right, for people who don't know what's going on, here's our checkerboard, and this is a problem. All right, we need to fix our checkerboard because our checkerboard does not line up. That's why we're doing it. All right, we need to do the math here and divide this by what it is. So we need to divide 1920 by 4 because it's a 4 cross by 4, right? Is that right? No, by 8. 1920 divided by 8, excuse me, it's 240. All right, so we need to set this to 240, and then we need 1080. Back up, 1080 divided by 8, 135. We set this to 135. There we go. So that should be, if I'm not mistaken, that should give us a tile. No, it's a 4x4. Darn it, we did it wrong. Or I did it wrong. All right, hold on. 1920 divided by 4, 480, and 1080 divided by 4 is 270. So it should be 480 and 270. So let's change this. 480 to 270 for our grid. Just so we're looking at the grid, let's look at the grid. There we go, 4x4. Then we go in here and it randomizes it. All right, we need to set this so that it's not 8x8, it's 4x4, 4 tab 4 tab 4 tab 4. There we go. All right, so it's randomizing it. So we get what it's doing is it's taking this grid array randomizer. What it does is it takes whatever the input is and it randomizes it. Well, we're only giving it black and white blocks, so it's going to randomize those and reposition them. So it's randomly picking black and white dots, and so it's creating basically places that we'll hopefully have some of those particles and other places where we will have void. And what we're going to do is multiply it. Now, we only need this end result image to get our initial, what ones of those particles we're going to be using for generating our random particle positions. And this is going to make sense in a minute. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put a disk cache here. So we're going to disk cache this. And admittedly, and we're going to set this to manual, and we're going to set this to 1, frame 1. All right. And then we're going to do a frame hold, and we can see that whoops, grabbed the wrong one. The frame hold did not connect up to our output or to our disk cache. So we'll take that and connect it to our disk cache, and we'll connect our viewer we'll look at it with our viewer like so. And we're going to set our frame hold to frame 1. And what that does is it means that it's going to grab this frame, what we see here, and it's never going to render it again. It's never going to have to do the math of this gimmick node again once it's done. So we always have this permanently. Now, if we want to change this, if we want to change this pattern, we can. And the way we change that pattern is we simply change this here. We can change this global random seed to get different values. So this is really useful because this is how we're going to basically create variations of our particles in different positions. We can use this one mask, or the variations of this one mask and our original tile set, and not have to re-render our random tile set multiple times. Hopefully that is our goal. And you're saying to yourself, but we already have it. Sort of. There's a problem with the thing we're going to be using in a minute. You'll see. We're about to do something that's going to, where it's going to actually take a little while, and why this is where we're actually picking up. All right, so we take this mask that we've made and we apply it to our thing, and we can see what it's done is it's taken our tiles and we're multiplying it over it, so that where this result is black, it basically eliminates the bits that were black, and where it's white, it will show those ones. So we wind up eliminating some of the tiles and winding up with others. Well, this doesn't really look all that random at this point. And we'll just, I think our random seed was originally 4. I think this was the pattern we used. It doesn't really matter too much. But what we're going to be doing after this is we're going to do one more. We're basically going to take the result of this and we're going to run it through this exact same basically array, this array randomizer, and we'll try and randomize these. And by doing this a second time, this is going to take a little bit longer, and we can see that the disk cache is now taking its toll. So we actually probably, we didn't do it here. Oh, I wanted to do it back here. Oops, this is going to take a bit. All right, we need to do it back there. Need to make sure you connect up your disk cache so that we get the results of both of these. We want both of those to be disk cached, and right, and that's time loop. Good. All right. So there we go. So we can see that that's rearranged them. So now they're no longer in a fixed. The reason we're doing it here is because prior to this point, they were in a fixed order. Now, by running it through this gimmick array node, we've randomized it. These two are the exact same particles, but these two are the exact same particles. But what it's done is it's randomized. It's basically picked them and put them wherever it wanted. And we can, again, change which particles we're using for this. I just want to make sure we're getting the right particles. And the other thing is that we're not restricted to using the destination. We can actually tell it that instead of doing just these 4, we can tell it that we want even more. We can reduce this so that it's closer to 20 patterns, or 20 by 20, and then we wind up with the grid that looks more like this. And so we wind up with something, a potential pattern. And the problem now, admittedly, I think this is too population dense for our needs at this point. But the goal here is that we have this to use as a potential, output variable. All right. So yes. All right. I need to slow down and breathe. So, what is the next thing we need to do? Let's first of all reduce this back down, because we're not actually going to use a 20 by 20. We're not going to output this 20 by 20. We're going to output this 4 by 4 still. We're only going to keep it very, very small. We don't want a whole lot of things. But I don't like the pattern that I'm getting here because it's too close to the original. So what we really want to do is play with this. Let's go back down. Let's go cycle through this until we wind up with a pattern that looks random in a way that looks, random enough. Things don't look like the 2 patterns are right next to one another. We just have to go through until we get something that looks appealing, which might be harder than I thought. This is taking much longer than I'd hoped. Whatever. This is good. We'll say this is good enough. Now, all right. one of the big problems that we're seeing right here is one of the things that's contributing to these things looking identical is also the fact that they also look like they're in a grid. So we need to obviously take the result of this because we've done another thing and we need to cache this again. Because why? We've cached this. So we're going to copy those, Alt-C, copy that, plug that in, put it here so that we have the result going through another disk cache. Remember, all of these, just disconnected our frame loop. The whole goal behind this is to disk cache these all. But one of the problems that we're facing is that our particles at this point are too big. I want these to be this sparse, but I want them at this point to be more or less in their final size. And the problem we face is that the gimmick node right before this has already has scaled this so that let's look at this. All right, we've scaled this. Even though we fed this in a relatively small image here, when it came out, it's scaled it up. So one of the things we need to do is we actually need to shrink the result of this. No matter how big we put something into this gimmick node, it's going to scale it up. We can actually, I'll take it back. We can scale it down here. We can scale it down here by changing the size here down to a smaller value. So instead of outputting this at 4, actually I'm going to do it this way. I'm doing this different than what I had done. I'd used a different technique. All right, we're going to drop this down here. And by dropping this down, what this is going to do is it's going to reduce the amount of calculation time that we're going to have in our output, hopefully, and speed up our final render. So let's go back over here and we're going to look at this. All right, this might not be obvious here because we were looking through the timeline. We're looking at this gimmick 3D extrude node here. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually move down to the tile node so we can see them in the tile size. So we can see these relative to the tile because this is going to shrink down when it goes to the tile node. So let's see it. So this is the actual size of the particles now. And the problem the problem we face is we need to actually see this in its actual size on screen. So let's hit the spacebar over our viewport, and then we're going to hit Control-1 to view this actual size. So these are about how big the particles are at this point. I'm just thinking those still look a little bit, I want them about half the size they are right now. Now, this is a little hard to do using the gimmick node. This is going to be a little bit hard. I don't know that this is a 1-to-1 ratio. What we're going to do is try changing it to half its size. So I'm going to set it from 0.6 or 0.06 to 0.03 and see it. Hopefully this is going to half it and not take it much further than that. And now we're starting to see what I was afraid we might see, which is I think the gimmick node is the 3D extrusion node is actually hitting a limit. And so we're seeing that we've lost a lot of detail and we're winding up with something that doesn't look like what we had a minute ago. We're actually winding up with something that's actually been reduced in output. So this is actually scaling it before it outputs it. So that's no good. So we're going to put it back to 0.6 where it was. And we're actually going to have to do it a different way, which is unfortunate. I was hoping this was going to save us a couple extra nodes, but it's not going to. So let's, right now, let's go back up here. This is rendering, as you can see, it has to calculate. The problem we have is that because the tile node does the time offset in it, it has to recalculate the entire cache for every one of those individual points or individual versions once it's done. So for right now, we're going to just go back to our original. We have to wait for our cache to finish before Natron catches up. So we just have to wait. This is going to take a few minutes. My apologies for this. There we go. Let's zoom back to this. So, oops, wait, we're not at after the node. There's our node. Let's go back here. There we go. All right, so this is what we've got at the end here. Let's go back to the beginning. So we're looking at this. You know what? We may have been looking at the wrong node. That might have been why it looked off. Let's make sure. I just want to make sure when we set this to 0.3 that it was actually maintaining a resolution. You know what? I'm not going to worry. We're going to say, all right, so here we have it. We have this. What we're going to do is instead of shrinking this down, well, actually, you know what? We should be able to see. Does this actually lose resolution? Or was that just updating the hash? It does not look like it lowered the resolution. I'll change my mind. Well, there is one thing that is happening. All right. And this is the reason I'm not going to do this. We are going to do it the other way. One of the things we might notice here is that the 3D extrusion has one flaw with it, which is it does not anti-alias. It says it has anti-aliasing, but it does not anti-alias the outside of this unless you use certain modes, and we're using flat shaded mode. So we want to change this to, we're going to set this back to 6. And what we're going to do instead is after this 3D extrusion, we're going to actually, we're going to do a transform this right here. We're going to transform. I'm going to hit transform. And we're going to do it. We're going to scale this. And now by scaling this to 0.5 to half its size, we can see now we've anti-aliased it by scaling it, because it's doing it actually does a cubic scale of it, and we're only cubic scaling it by 1 or by 0.5, so it should give us a very clean anti-aliasing. It's super sampling it, so to speak. And so then what we're going to do, the problem we face, however, is by doing that, we can see that we shrank it. And so the disk cache, well, I'm not positive the disk cache is going to disk cache the entire image. Let's see if the disk cache actually disk caches it with the, yeah, it disk caches the ROD. So we're not getting, we need to fix our ROD here. All right. So that means we need to do basically take the equivalent of what we're doing here and do it over here. So we're actually going to just reuse this one. We're going to use this one over here and just copy it. We're going to take this, which is already doing what we want, which is using the B bounding box of our solid, right? If we look at this, this is using the solids bounding box as the output of this, and we put it over it, and that will take this transform, shift it back so that it works. Then we take the output of that, and we cache that, and we can put it in, and then when we tile, it will tile that, and we'll wind up with a nicely anti-aliased result. And it's going to take a bit, and then we'll go to the frame loop down here, which is going to take a little bit, and then, you know what, we might as well do the whole thing because it's going to do it all anyway. So we'll go down here. And so then we wind up with ultimately this, and it's going to take a while. This takes a while. This was one of the reasons that we're doing this, is so that we wind up with this result. But we can see that we have a grid pattern here, even though our particles are at their final size, and they'll be randomly positioned, they look gridded relative to one another. So we need some way of offsetting the end result once this caches. And we have to wait for the cache, admittedly. So this is going to take a little while. This is going to be one of the slower episodes, unfortunately. And there's nothing we really can do. If we drop the resolution, which sounds good, the problem is gimmick, as we might remember from previous things. Gimmick does not like to actually drop the render resolution all that much. So we wind up with issues. But we can see, there we go. We've got our disk cache and it scales up nicely because it is cached. So we can zoom in and out very quickly and get our final result because the cache is at full resolution. All right, so here we go. Here's our final particles. We can see them in their final glory. They're offset. It doesn't matter. They just look a little different. But the big problem is, again, these are gridded. These are gridded. They don't look, they're following a grid. They look very obviously relative in, you could connect the dots and basically we would wind up with a, something that looks off. So how do we fix this? We're going to fix this with another gimmick node. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can read our nodes a little bit better. We're going to take our time loop here and we're going to go into our gimmick. Let's go over here and do it over here so that everybody can see it. Now you don't have to worry about it going behind things. So we're going to go into arrays and tiles and we're going to do, it's called tile random shifts. There we go. I don't know if you can see that below. That's probably slightly off screen due to this, but it's called random shifts. All right. And so what random shifts does is you can't see this with our thing or with what we've got here for an input, but what it's going to do is basically all the blocks, if we were to, I don't want to grab our original, our checkerboard, but if we had these, if we envision our checkerboard, what it would do is it would take each one of those blocks and it would take basically would treat the entire image. It would break the entire image up and shift it inside of these blocks a certain amount. The problem is that it means that if we shift it too much, that this dot will wind up entering to the space that this dot occupies. And so we are limited. This amplitude is how much it can shift over. And depending on how much the block next to it has been shifted in one direction or the other, limits it. So we only get about half of the distance. So we want these before we start doing it. Basically, we get about half of its movement distance before a black space buffer around it before we risk a particle from another area running into this particle's zone. And what that area is, it's unknown. But by shrinking it down first, we wind up giving ourselves more buffer room for this to work, so we can play around with our amplitude. And as we can see, just with 10, we're already getting enough of a variant that it's looking pretty good. But here we go. We can see that when we shifted it up to 20, we lost one of our dots. We have a problem over here where another one of the dots is coming in. This dot over here is a half a dot. Yep, we can see these are not actually lining up anymore. They're off. So bringing it down to 10 should hopefully keep it, fairly close. We might play with a little bit to get it a little more random. But anyway, 12. Oh, yes. And we also wanted to set our tiles. Duh. We need to set it that it's a 4x4 array. So one of the problems that we have is that this is a 10x10. Well, that's also a problem. 4x4. That's going to fix a lot of things. There we go. Now the 4x4, is that right? Yes, it should be right. 4x4 should wind up give us a much better array. And now we should have much more latitude with how far we can push this. And before things start looking really weird. And there we go. Now I was thinking that was looking awfully weird. There we go. We can see that started to fade right there. So we don't want to take it too far, but we can get much more randomized values here by doing that. And that means that a pattern or our particles are no longer stuck to this grid, and we wind up with something that actually looks random. Now, why do we want to keep it down to a small amount? The problem we have is that if we make too many particles that are too similar and repeat themselves too close to one another, it's going to look like, it's going to be obvious that they're the same particle repeated and placed around. So we need to keep these down to small batches. And I think that by keeping them down to an area of about 5 to 10, you'll wind up with a decent amount, which is why I recommend using 2 or 3 different patterns offset to get your particle patterns. If you have 2 or 3, different patterns, usually I would recommend ultimately 3, but in our case, we're not going to actually do more than 2. We're probably going to just stick to 1 for the purposes of this. But know that if you do 3, I've told you, there's a principle of at least 3 for detail levels. You want to have enough variety so that people's eyes don't start recognizing repetition. And that means you need at least 3 variants of things being offset in rotation per section, and we gave it enough. We gave it 16 potential things to choose from, even though it didn't choose 16. Of that, it shows, probably 3 different variants in this, and then it might have repeated each one twice. So we wind up with 2 variants. Now, again, if we do a second version of this, we're going to wind up with a new variant of this exact same thing. But it's going to be offset, and then we can composite those together. But the key thing here is by doing this, by applying these on this way, we also now have the ability to treat this as an individual unit of particles that we can mix with another unit of particles and not overwhelm ourselves. Sort of like what we did with the layers in snow particles, except for this is actually much more limited. And because we're doing smaller particles and we're caching entire animations, this should, hopefully, in theory, render in some ways faster once you pass a certain point. Admittedly, those first 48 frames are going to be pretty dull and brutal on most people's systems. But once it passes that point, everything should speed up drastically. All right. And because of that, we're going to actually do this a little bit, but we're going to, we're going to enter sketchy neighborhood. I think we're going to make a backup of our project right now and do our project version here. Let me just check our time. We're about 44 minutes into this. All right, so I don't want to go too much further. I wanted to get into this and explain why everything's working and how it's working. And we're going to go into how we animate this layer. And the way we're going to animate this layer and get it, we're going to make at least 2 layers, 2 variants of this. So we know that at this point, above this node here, all right, I'm going to have to look at it. At this point, if we go up to this point up here, this is our input where the randomization happens. So in order to loop duplicate this, what we really want to do is isolate all of this whole section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a backward drop around this so that we can identify that this is one particle, quote, layer, so to speak. And so what we're going to do is in here, we're going to hit tab. We're going to create a backdrop by typing BACK, backdrop, hit return when we see backdrop, and there we go. And we're just going to drag that out like so. And I'm going to drag that so it's down here. And then I'm going to hold down control. If you hold down control, you can drag this around without pulling the stuff behind it. So you can get your frame to match up a little bit better. And then we're going to drag this down like so it's a little tighter in here. And we'll pull this in actually like so. That way we can make this a little more optimized. But we do want to add a few more nodes in here so that when we make each one of these layers, we're working with something that is going to, we're not going to recolor it right now. We're going to focus on actually getting this done. All right, so this represents one layer. So if I select this backdrop and I hit Alt-C, I get a second backdrop. that is the exact same of this. So I can make my new layer, and all I have to do is fix the bits that are going to be my new part. All right, so let's go over to this one. As we can remember, this is our first one. If we go over to our second one, which is already preset, whoa, it looks all, whoa, that looks weird. Oh, the reason it's doing that is because it doesn't have the input on A. So this is going to be a little tricky because that A was dangling over the top, which we need to connect that up to the time loop. There we go. And we wind up with the same result. All right. All we need to do to fix this, or to change up this result, is we should be able to go into this array, this gimmick array over here, which is our pattern that chooses which blocks are blocked out. We simply go into here and we say, okay, I want to pick a different set of blocks. I'll just change this to, 3. There we go. And I wound up with a totally different pattern. And if I've got a whole different pattern, is it close enough to the other one? Is there any overlap between these two? There's a little bit of overlap. I don't like the fact that those two particles are overlapped, so I might change that a little bit more. You know what? Just so we can see this, what we want to do now is we want to actually merge these two. So we're going to do an M, do a merge. And by the way, the reason this is rendering so much faster now is because prior to this point, this frame loop up here, it's cached at that point. So none of these are actually having to rebuild anything past that point. So this is all the background for this is already done. We are just dealing with what's happening afterwards. All right. So by duplicating that, it already knows that it can use that. So hopefully we're going to speed things up. Now we've put a merge node here, and you can see that the merge node has gone to input 2 of a viewer, which is not what we wanted. We're going to put B there, A into there. And one of the things that we see when we merge the two together, or might see, actually it seems to be working right. We can see that they've merged together. So we have this one with this one, but when we go together, what we may or may not notice is that these particular points here are actually they're brighter than they were. And we need a way of identifying that in some visual sense. So what I think the easiest way to do this is to change our blend method to probably difference. And we're going to say difference. All right. Which, as you can see, as soon as we did difference, it changed it so that all the ones that are white or pure white are staying pure white, but the ones that match disappeared. Then what we want to do is drop our mix value to 0.5. And that way, I think, nope, that's not going to work. Darn it. I'd hoped that by doing that. All right, so thinking that was going to work. We're at unknown territory. I was trying to think of a quick way that might fix it. All right, we're going to set the mix value back to 1. We need a way to identify them, and the only way I can think of might be easy is to take it and uncheck on the output of our gimmick tile node, is to uncheck one of the values. So we can see here by unchecking the red here, we wind up with red on that one, and by unchecking the green, say over here, we're going to wind up with something different. And you know what? That's just going to look weird. It looks very weird. Actually, it does not. They don't match perfectly. Well, that is actually weird. We're getting echoes. This is kind of fascinating in a sense, because what we're winding up with over here, oh, that is so very strange. Oh, here I was thinking that, it's really weird. What's happening is that because it's turned off the effect, not so we actually, that's kind of cool in a sense. We're getting double effect. All right, we need to turn those back on. All right, that's not going to work either. We need to take the result of this and run it through a shuffle node. I didn't want to do that. There's always a way. Oh, Nope, shuffle node. Well, yeah, we could do it with the shuffle node. We'll just duplicate the shuffle node. We'll pop the shuffle node in there too, so that when we duplicate this, copy that over there, put the B in there. All right, and connect the shuffle node there. So the way we do it with the shuffle node is we tell it that on one of them we want the R to be 0, and on the other one we want the R to be, or the green to be 0. And then when we look at the 2, we should wind up with something. So what we should wind up with is on this one, we have cyan. All right, we can see that it's cyan, this like light blue. On the other one, we wind up with magenta because it's just, it's excuse me. This one we have no green, so it's just blue and red, which means we wind up with magenta. This one has no, this other one has no magenta, which means blue and green, which makes cyan. And when they, where the two overlap, we're going to have the cyan and magenta merge, so we wind up with yellow. And so where we see the yellow, we know that yellow means, a yellow particle means that the two maps are overlapping one another. So that way, now that we know that that means it's matching, that makes our life easier, because all we have to do is figure out one of the arrays, which one of these arrays we want to change around so that it doesn't match. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this second array over here this time. All right, so we're going to change it from global random 18 to global random, I don't know, let's see, 17, 16, 15. Oh, wait a minute, we had something there. It looked like 15, 16. Actually, that looks pretty good. Oh, no, we've still got a random there. Oh, it's really hard with these tiny particles. Oh, well, I recommend not shrinking your particles until after you've done this process, because it'll make it easier to visualize in the end. I think that we might actually have overlap there. We definitely have overlap happening there. So just make sure, you know. Anyhow, we get the idea here. The whole goal of this is to find one of these, find a pattern that's going to allow us to randomize this in some way that we get something that's decent. Now, here's the thing. Even if they do match, it doesn't, or are in the same place at this point in time, it really doesn't matter too much, because we also have one other thing at our fingertips, which will fix this as well, which is the time offset. If we go into the time offset, or the gimmick time random, we also have it down here. We can global random this as well, which is going to throw it off a bit. And so even though they're passing through the same space and they're occupied in the same basic general vicinity, and by just offsetting that by 1 digit, now they're no longer in exactly the same place as well. And we can also make these move in different directions. In theory, because the problem is one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be having an explosion sort of moving this. We'll see. But we can see that they don't overlap perfectly. So we actually have, this is going to work. It's not as nice because they're sort of, the key is we want to have a decent spread of our particles once we get these all put together. And ultimately, by the way, these shift nodes are not, or excuse me, these shuffle nodes, not shift nodes. Shuffle nodes are not going to be needed to view this. But anyway, for the time being, that gives us, lets us see our particle, or this let us see our particle layers. I might play with this a little bit. We might play with this a little bit more. I don't want to do that because I want to make sure we get, show how to animate this from the standpoint of doing at least, I want to do 3 layers. So we're going to do this one more time. All right. So let's take our second one. We'll just, for the time being, we'll, whoops, not V. Uh-oh. That should have pasted something. Oh, it did. It's not going to. Oh, right, because I hit Alt. Good. Alt-C. We'll copy our second one. And we're going to have a problem here with that A. Just grab that, connect it up here. So we have a third one. Uh-oh. That time shift down below is no longer in it. There we go. Pull that down. The name just got too big. As long as it's a little bit of it's outside of it, it's going to be a problem. So this one, because we are doing, we have a third color, we can't do green anymore. So we'll put this back to our green and we'll change it so that this one is blue, is 0. And then we can take that and put that into A2. And we ought to see that as something totally different. And we can, it's actually blending together possibly in a way that is not that noticeable. Anyway, yes, we're starting with yellow, and the yellow is doing its difference, and it's not actually affecting. Oh, yes, we're winding up with cyan because it's blending with the blue. All right, that creates another problem. Oh, that creates... Oy. Anyway, it creates problems. Not the best thing in the world. Let's see, maybe... Oy. All right, well, anyway, what we need to do is basically we want to randomize this one, and it's easy enough. We know already how. We're going to just change this to another random number. Doesn't matter which one. We're going to go to this, change it to a random number. We're going to just drop it down one number or two numbers, and then we're going to go to the last thing. There's three things. Is this, and this. When we change all three of them to three different random numbers, we should wind up with something... you know what? I'm going to take it in a different direction. There we go. I want to get some particles. I want to get these particles so that they go up into these areas up here. So I'm going to just try and... Oh, wait a minute. We want that there. You know what? I think I'm going to switch this one until we wind up with a particle up in the upper left-hand corner. Let's just see if we can... There we go. We got a particle up there and a particle up there. I like that. So here's our yellows, which are over here. Those are obviously our new particles are mixing in. And so now let's look at all our particles together, and we ought to, if we disable these, so we'll disable that, and disable that. The shuffle, 3 shuffle nodes we've disabled, so we can see our particles, and we can see that these are looking similar. Oh, I don't like that. We're gonna, let's change. Let's see. Let's see this one. Wait, where is it? Oops, I'm not selecting the right one. Let's change this around a little bit. There we go. Let's just change it around. All right, that's fine. I'm not going to worry about one set of 3 particles that are close to one another. But we can see, it doesn't matter. It's randomized, right? It looks random. They're not in exactly the same place because we used that offset, all right, that pan shift. And remember, don't push the pan shift too much, because if the pan shift is too much, the particles will go too far all over the place, or too all over the place, and then we'll have a problem when we actually go to animate. So... or they risk one of them when you change the variables jumping outside of its zone to another block in another one of the frames. It gets iffy. You got to be very careful, and I'm not positive. I can't tell you what the value is because I haven't actually tested it. It's a really difficult thing to test. How far is the right amount of magnitude to move it, or to keep it within basically half a unit. We're guessing. All right. So, but I think we're safe at this point with what we are. I haven't seen anything that looks like it, and at this point it's not looking like it is, and we're going to wind up with things that look 3D. So the last thing we want to do is, how are we going to actually animate these? I think the best thing to do is a card 3D. Why a card 3D? Well, because one of the things we have not done, one of the problems, or one of the things I'm thinking about regarding this, and people might want to think about, we're running into the situation where we have, this is a layer, okay? If we treat this as a single layer of particles, we may want to do another particle or 2, I would probably say 2 more sets similar to this, but at a different scale. of particles. So this would be like a small particle. Then you'd want a medium particle set, very much like we did in the snow tutorial back in December. By doing that, and I probably will set this up for the next one because we're running out of time. If we do 3 of those, and I'll have this all set up hopefully for the next one. What that will do is it will allow us to create enough variation per layer and per thing that we should wind up with a very good, what looks like particle simulation of particles. And we shall see. We'll know next one. If it doesn't work, I will. We're going into uncharted territory. All right, yeah, let's do a card 3D. Let's do card 3D at this point. I think card 3Ds are going to be our best way to transform this. So, if you haven't seen what it's going to do, basically what we're going to do, the reason we're using a card 3D here is we want to take our what we have for a result. And by the way, we don't need these shuffle nodes anymore in theory, but because we're going to be, if you make more layers, we want to keep them there. Let's just keep them disabled. In the next video, if they're gone, it's because I've already laid everything out, and I'll probably go over that again. But for the time being, let's just focus on one of these. All right, so this is one of our layers. Now, Card 3D, unlike Transform, doesn't allow us. Okay, we're not going to use Card 3D. Why are we not going to use Card 3D? Card 3D is useful if we're transforming things towards us or away from us. We're going to be, in the effect we're going for, we're not going to be pushing particles towards us. We're going to be having something coming along, a laser basically coming along, and I know you haven't seen this unless you watch the video in the link. There's going to be a laser that's going to come through and it's going to blow through basically a font. And the particles are going to more or less move at a... I'm going to treat them as a fixed distance. We may move the layer itself, but we're not going to move the individual particle sets in the layer independently in 3D. I want to keep the particle sets, in other words, all these 3 that are the same particle size together, moving the same way. So we can use just a straight 2D transform for this, which is going to make our lives for transforming easier. So we're going to hit T, and whoops, why didn't that go? What happened here? Where's our transform? Aha, there it is. It put it in, we added a transform node. It didn't connect it because we didn't have anything connected to it. All right, so we're going to select that, put that there, and we get this transform node. Now, why are we using a transform node as opposed to Card 3D? Because transform node has this lovely visual grabbable transform node or transformation that we can pull, and so we can look at our particles and say, okay, I want my particles to sort of start off somewhere around here at where they're all still on the frame, and I want to be able to push these particles in the general direction. You know what? I actually think here's another thing we can do. We can rotate this so our particles are sort of facing this direction as well. There we go. And we could scale this potentially. We could scale this even more so with this, but now we can like rotate this a little bit. All right, so we've got that. And we don't want to, I don't want to make these particular particles. All right, we're going to keep these ones here. We're going to just, for the moment, we're going to pretend that these were in the animation. I don't know what the animation is. For right now, we're just going to animate this as is. We're going to take this and pretend this is our points. We're going to just set a key. This is only so you understand how this works. We're going to set a key. You may, just so you know, so you don't lose these, want to put a second transform in here after you've done your initial positioning with them this way, so that, you know, you can use this as another way of getting them in a different location. you may want to put one to reset it so you zero them out. I'm not going to do that for right now because this is quick just to show you. But we've rotated it. Then we're going to move ahead. I'm going to say, right. This happens, this is happening. I'm going to say this is going to happen. This is going to happen fast. So frame 1, I'm going to say in 24 frames, it's probably going to be done. So we're going to set our thing into 24. Now, admittedly, I'm starting this at the beginning. So at frame 25, I'm going to just grab this and say, bam. This might even not be fast enough. All right, that didn't move. Why did you not move? That is not moving. Let's make sure we've got it. Right? Come on. Natron, give me this. Oh, this is a problem. Natron is not letting us interact with it, which defeats the whole reason that we picked this node over not over using a card 3D, was to do this. All right. In that case, what I think we want to do is go back to frame 1, and let's remove our animation, all dimensions. Okay, let's reset to defaults all dimensions, and let's pull that there, and then okay, that's weird. This has maintained its maintained its rotation. All right, that's fine. So we'll just pull this off over here. And what I'm going to do, we're just going to hit T and do another transform. And we're going to do our transform with this, with a second node. So remember I talked about zeroing out. This is actually better for animation purposes. I was doing the other way to save us time, but clearly Natron didn't want to work with us. So we're on frame 1. We're going to hit set a key on all dimensions. We're not going to do any rotate. Oops. Set a key all dimensions. There we go. All right, so on frame 1, we're going to go forward 24 frames. And now we're going to take our animation and we're going to pull it. There we go. So we pull it off like that. There we go. Now it's not giving us any lip. So now if we hit play and watch this, hopefully... I don't want to wait for this. What it would do as we moved, we would see those particles move in time and relative. And what we want to do is basically take this type of transform here, and we want to do it to each one. So I'll copy those here. We'll have the same thing. And we'll, again, Alt copy. And of course, this is going to mean that each one of these is going to be incorrectly set because we need to go over here to each one and do the initial setup here. So this animation, that is interesting. We go over to this one, we can see it's offset in a different point. We don't necessarily want this one here, so we'll reset our rotation. Let's reset that to default. Let's take a look at what this is. Let's actually just hit reset to default so everything's reset for our position one. And we may take this off like this and then kind of twist it this way a little bit so we have something more lines there. And I don't know, that might help. And then, of course, then we have our same kind of animation here. But this one, we can change our animation. We can we have a similar animation, but what we could do in theory, because it's already animated that for this particular animation, we can see, all right, well, this animation doesn't work as well for this one. We go back to the beginning. When we go back to the beginning, we want to start this instead of here. We want to, or actually we did want to, let's go back here to this. And pull this. We want to pull this down. All right, we have this. You know what? I think I want to pull this down so it's more like this. Why not? A little off frame. And then we'll go down to this other one and take that. And we're going to use this as our animation. In frame 0, we have it here, and we're going to go forward to frame 24, and we can see it's there. So there we go. We can see that it's, you know, animated, and it's going to take a minute to update if we do any animation, anything else. So we're going to go back to frame 0. I don't want to go through that. Let's go back to this one. Let's do the next one. I want to get these done so that we can all see it, hopefully, so that when we render it, we'll see it relative to one another. Let's grab this last one, and gonna grab this, and let's rotate this. I don't know, let's say we want to rotate it like we'll have it like that, and also like this, because remember, these are going in this direction diagonally across. We're gonna pretend the laser's coming from that direction. Now I might change this again, but this is where I want it to start from. And then I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to go forward to frame 25. And right, we want to see where it ends. And we'll just put that one maybe, I don't know, there instead, so that it crosses over the other ones. So it's not a perfect thing. So there's sort of this zigzaggy overlap. All right, so if we go back here and we take, all right, so this merge right here, that's a difference currently, is going into the shuffle nodes. We want to actually connect these. This is going to be where all 3 layers come in and merge and form the final version of our layer. And this is where we may want to, at this point, cache. I'm thinking about this. This might be where we want to cache the results of this animation for this particular frame. And instead of doing difference here, we want to set this to, we probably want to set this back to over, which should hopefully, if everything works right, give us all our layers mixed together. I'm hoping, but I'm not seeing it. All right, let's just view that, view this, view that, view that. Why is this not giving us what we want over here? Okay. Oh, we're at the end of it. That's why. All right. So we start off here. Here's the beginning of our animation. And so we can see that at the beginning of our animation, we have all these different elements. I don't know if you can see it, but let's look at it. They're all lined up in different positions. And then at the end, they're going to be, I went only 24 frames in. They're at this position here. So it didn't render it all out. And so what we want to do is disk cache this final thing, result. So I'll copy this so that once this is done and we get to, we've run into the same problem that we've run into in the past, which is after this is composited together, we're winding up with this, the ROD does not match our final destination, which is bad. So what we want to do is do one more comp here where we take our, this node. We're going to want to take, let's just take this here. We're going to put a dot node here and connect that in here. All right. So this is our black node here. That's our HD resolution. It's just a black background, HD. And it's going to take a while because it's comping all that together. We can see it's black. We connect this dot node up there. And right off of this, if we go down here and connect that, we're going to do a merge off of that. And we're going to tell that merge that we want to use the bounding box of B. And then we're going to take that, and I accidentally didn't grab the dot. I'm not going to worry too much. It's a little close to that, but it's fine. We're going to just bring that in like that and connect it up there. All right. So why are we doing that? Because this gimmick array, oh, whoopsie, I didn't want the array node. Oh well, doesn't matter. It's still good practice. What we want to do is basically make it so that what comes out of this gets cropped So no more than what's needed in our view is actually rendering at any given time. That should speed up everything when we do the final cache. And so we do our cache here, and then we want a time loop. So we can alt copy that here, and we'll put that time loop here. Now remember, we're only doing 24 frames at this point because that's our animation, but I'm not going to worry. We have, 48 frames. We're going to just see this, and hopefully, what time are we looking at? We're now in 16. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up at this point. We don't want to take any longer to render this. As we can see, what we have here is we get the idea behind this. We see the transformations happening. We're going to wind up with 3 layers that are going to zigzag back and forth, and we get 3 layers of particles, and we should get each layer should be much more interesting, and they're going to have interesting particles per layer. We might have we could change this up using different particle sets if we wanted to per layer, so we have variety per layer. As I said, I just stuck to one particle for this, but we could feed a different particle per one. The key is to mix them up so that you get the different particles per layer, per thing, and so forth, so that it looks like you get a great variety. Anyhow, and then you're going to cache it. And I'll have it all set up for the next one. I don't want to run this any longer because of what it was. We don't really have a today's goal other than to look at the video copilot version of this. So I'm going to cut back to me. I'm going to say that I think we've pretty much got as far as we're going to get on today's episode. This will go into part 3, where we're going to take this to the next level, and where we're going to sort of look at how we take what we've done today and have merged it, and we're going to look at it, what we've gotten but expanded. I'm going to go through it but pre-comped into something more elaborate for the next time, or at least I hope to. I'll let people know if it doesn't work. That's the risk we're going to have to take, but I'll get something so it's working for next time. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Keep on Natroning.